The Lorani High Counselor, Exel Tanis, stood before the emergency session, his normally luminescent skin dulled by exhaustion. 3 days without rest had taken their toll, but sleep was a luxury none could afford with extinction looming. "The Parthas system has gone silent," he announced, voice modulator struggling to maintain composure. "All 4 billion inhabitants lost." Holographic displays showed the grim progression. 12 worlds reduced to barren husks in less than a standard solar cycle. The Cythera swarm devoured everything: plants, animals, even microorganisms. Their massive hive ships left nothing but stripped bedrock and poisoned atmospheres. "We have exhausted all diplomatic channels," Sub-Counselor Meverine added, her 4 arms gesturing helplessly at the defensive projections. "Our military vessels are outmatched 20-1. The Lorani Confederation had evolved as diplomats and traders, their technological advancement focused on art, medicine, and interstellar commerce. Their defensive fleet, barely used in 8 centuries of peaceful expansion, now faced systematic annihilation." "What of our allies?" asked Science Director Pelvonis. "The Centauri Republic has sealed their borders. The Rigelian Compact sends thoughts of solidarity, but no ships." Exel Tanis's mandibles clicked in frustration. "Even the Arcturians, who owe us their very survival after the plague years, claim neutrality." Silence fell across the chamber until Archivist Zinlora, oldest among them, spoke. "There is one possibility, though it violates our oldest protocols." All eyes turned to the ancient Lorani as she activated a restricted database. A small blue-green world appeared, surrounded by warning markers and quarantine beacons. "Designation Sol 3, she explained. "Local name, Earth." "The Deathworlders," gasped Mevron. "Surely you cannot suggest." "I suggest survival," Zinlora interrupted. "Their civilization has advanced considerably since our last observation. They've reached their moon, established Mars colonies. Their quantum communications technology is surprisingly sophisticated." The council erupted in overlapping objections until Exel Tanis raised all 4 hands for silence. "What makes these beings suitable allies against the Cythera?" he asked. Zinlora manipulated the display, showing historical footage. Humans fighting across landscapes, developing increasingly efficient weapons, training relentlessly for conflicts both real and imagined. "They are predators," she explained. "Their evolution occurred on a high-gravity world with extreme temperature variations, atmospheric toxins, and apex predators that hunted them for millennia. Where we evolved to cooperate, they evolved to compete. Where we developed consensus, they developed strategy. They are dangerous, yes, but perhaps we need dangerous allies." Reluctantly, the Council authorized an emergency broadcast on all frequencies, including the primitive electromagnetic spectrum humans still monitored. The message contained the Confederation's coordinates, visual evidence of the Cythera threat, and a desperate plea for assistance. 12 hours later, in a classified underground facility beneath Wyoming's mountains, General Zhang reviewed the translated alien message with Earth's Unified Defense Command. Satellite imagery showed Lorani evacuation centers overflowing with refugees, their elegant architecture contrasting with hastily assembled shield generators. "Assessment," Zhang asked his team. "Message authenticity confirmed at 97.4% probability," Lieutenant Park replied. "The threat appears genuine. These Cythera exhibit resource consumption patterns consistent with exponential expansion. If they finish with these Lorani and discover Earth next." Admiral Okafor left the implication hanging. Zhang studied the tactical displays, particularly the Cythera ship configurations. His expression hardened into determination. "Prepare the Aurora fleet," he ordered. "All 7 vessels. We launch in 12 hours. "Sir," Park interjected, "the Aurora craft have never attempted beyond lunar deployment. The FTL drive remains theoretical." "Not anymore," Zhang replied. "Humanity has prepared for this moment for centuries. Time to see if we're ready. Across the vastness of space, the Lorani monitoring station detected a simple response that sent ripples of both hope and fear through their collective. We're coming. Hold the line. The Lorani orbital sanctuary hummed with emergency protocols as evacuation ships prepared for departure. High Counselor Excel Tanis hadn't slept in nearly 6 rotation cycles, sustained only by nutrient infusions and duty. Cythera fleet approaching the outer defense grid, announced Tactical Monitor Jev Tal, her voice steady despite the hopelessness of their situation. Estimated arrival: 12 standard units. None expected their desperate message to bring help in time. The council chambers had thinned as members departed with their families toward the designated refuge worlds. A proximity alert suddenly blared across the command center. Unknown vessel detected. Jevtal's appendages danced frantically across her console. It appeared. Nowhere. No hyperspace signature, no jump distortion. The view screen displayed a sleek vessel unlike any in Confederation records, matte black with minimal markings and pronounced weapon emplacements. Before security protocols could activate, a communication request flashed across their systems. "They're using our encrypted channels," whispered Sub-Counselor Mevron in disbelief. "How is that possible?" The screen illuminated to reveal a human female, her dark hair pulled back tightly, expression calm but alert. "This is Dr. Elena Kuznetsova of Earth Vessel Aurora 1, she stated. "We received your distress call. Request immediate docking clearance and tactical briefing." 20 minutes later, the Lorani leadership watched in stunned silence as Dr. Kuznetsova removed her breathing apparatus upon entering the council chamber. Environmental scanners went haywire, detecting oxygen consumption rates that should be toxic, body density readings that defied their understanding of viable biological structures. "Our atmosphere." Excel Tanis began, concerned. "Our scientists indicated it would be insufficient for your species." Elena smiled slightly. "We've made adaptations. This is actually quite pleasant compared to our training facilities." Behind her, Admiral Jackson and 2 security officers entered, their muscular frames making the delicate Lorani furniture appear childlike by comparison. The Admiral immediately focused on the tactical displays showing the approaching Cythera fleet. "Your defensive formations are predictable," he observed, stepping closer to examine the holographic projections. "That's why they're cutting through your forces so easily. We've optimized our positions using our most advanced algorithms," Jevtal replied, antenna twitching in mild offense. Jackson shook his head. "War isn't mathematics. It's chaos theory in practice." With practiced movements, he manipulated the holographic display, rearranging the Lorani defensive positions into patterns that appeared random to the aliens, but contained a strategic logic that became apparent only when he explained it. "You've been fighting defensively, retreating from system to system," he continued. "The Cythera expect that now. They don't expect you to suddenly attack." Dr. Kuznetsova watched the Lorani reactions, a mixture of hope and unease. 6 more Earth vessels will arrive within 10 hours, she explained. "But we need to begin preparations immediately." "Your ships," Excel Tanis ventured carefully. "Your technology. Our intelligence suggested humans were centuries from achieving interstellar travel." "We've been motivated," Elena replied. "Earth has imagined this moment for generations. Contact with hostile alien forces. We've prepared accordingly." She projected images of Earth's unified defense system, underground cities, orbital platforms, training facilities where humans voluntarily subjected themselves to extreme conditions. "Your warning beacons around our system," she continued, "we detected those 50 years ago. They made us wonder what was out there that we needed to be protected from, or what others needed protection from us." As the Lorani struggled to reconcile these revelations, Admiral Jackson finished his tactical adjustments and turned to face them, eyes gleaming with something the peaceful Lorani had never evolved to understand: the anticipation of battle. "The Cythera have never encountered humans," he said with quiet confidence. They have no idea what's coming. Lieutenant Commander Rhea Patel stood before the combined Lorani War Council, her compact frame belying the intensity of her presence. The assembled alien officers watched with mandibles slightly parted as she systematically dismantled centuries of their tactical doctrine. "Your problem isn't technological," she explained, swiping away their elaborate battle simulations. "Your ships are actually quite advanced. Your problem is conceptual." The holographic display shifted to show previous Lorani engagements with the Xithera, perfect formations, mathematically optimal firing solutions. Textbook defensive maneuvers. "You fight like engineers," Rhea continued. "The Xithera counter like engineers. But warfare isn't engineering, it's psychology." Admiral Tonval, the Lorani's most decorated commander, raised a hesitant appendage. "Our tactical systems compute optimal response patterns based on thousands of variables. And that's precisely why you're losing," Rhea replied, not unkindly. "The Xithera know exactly what you'll do because you always do the optimal thing." She brought up new displays, showing historical human conflicts. Ancient battles where smaller forces defeated larger ones through terrain advantage. Modern special forces operations where conventional wisdom was deliberately abandoned. Thermopylae, Agincourt, Midway, Endor. She referenced the last with a slight smile that went unnoticed by the aliens. Human military history is filled with victories that defied mathematical probability. A younger Lorani officer named Kexalin moved closer to the display, fascinated. These smaller forces should have been annihilated. How did they prevail? By making the enemy react emotionally rather than logically, Rhea explained. By appearing vulnerable when they were strong. By seeming strong when they were vulnerable. She brought up a new simulation, showing the current star system where the Lorani defense was barely holding. "This is Operation Hornet's Nest," she explained. "We're going to deliberately weaken defenses around these outlying positions, make them look like easy targets." The Lorani commanders burst into overlapping objections until Admiral Jackson entered the room. "Those worlds have already been evacuated," he said firmly. "We're not sacrificing lives. We're sacrificing real estate to win the war." "But those colonies," protested Admiral Tonval. "Generations of development. Which would you rather preserve?" Jackson asked. "Your buildings or your species?" Silence fell across the chamber as the stark choice settled over them. Meanwhile, in the Lorani engineering bay, Dr. Kuznetsova supervised the modification of alien vessels. Human technicians worked alongside increasingly intrigued Lorani engineers, retrofitting their elegant ships with systems that made the aliens visibly uncomfortable. "These targeting arrays," Chief Engineer Ziv Pol observed, "they prioritize command nodes rather than propulsion systems." "Precisely," Alina confirmed. "You've been disabling ships. We disable command structures." "But the loss of life. The Xithera are a hive mind," Alina reminded him gently. "There are no civilians, no non-combatants. Every drone is part of their military structure." Across the station, human specialists integrated with Lorani teams, introducing concepts alien to their peaceful civilization. Electronic warfare, misinformation tactics, psychological operations designed to confuse rather than directly engage. In the Strategic Command Center, Rhea's plan took final shape. The Xithera would be drawn into a carefully crafted trap, lured by apparent weakness into a position where their superior numbers became a liability rather than an advantage. "This goes against everything in our tactical manuals," Admiral Tonval said quietly to Jackson as they finalized the operation. The human admiral's expression remained impassive. "That's exactly why it will work. Your manuals are predictable. We're not." As the planning concluded, a young Lorani communications officer approached Commander Patel with evident hesitation. "These tactics," she asked softly, "they seem dishonorable." Rhea considered this before answering. "In human history, we learned a painful lesson. Honor means nothing to the dead. The only honorable outcome is survival. The Procyon outpost hung against the backdrop of a mineral-rich asteroid field, its defense grid deliberately operating at 60% capacity. Commander Sofia Rodriguez observed the sensors from her position aboard the stealth insertion vessel Shadow Talon, hidden within the field's densest cluster. Cythera scout ships have entered the system, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Chen. 8 vessels, standard configuration. Sophia nodded, the motion barely visible in her infiltration armor. Right on schedule. Status of the primary fleet. Captain Nkosi reports all ships in position within the nebula. M-mines armed and ready. The plan relied on perfect timing, and the one advantage humans had identified in the Cythera behavior patterns, predictability. The hive mind made them devastatingly coordinated, but ultimately repetitive. They had never needed to adapt. Team check, Sophia ordered, scanning her strike squad. 6 humans in advanced infiltration gear acknowledged readiness, their expressions focused beneath partial face shields. 3 hours later, after the Cythera scouts predictably called in reinforcements, Sophia's team magnetized to the hull of the massive command vessel. Cutting tools made short work of the outer plating, designed to withstand energy weapons, but vulnerable to primitive mechanical intrusion. Remember, Sophia whispered as they navigated the alien corridors. They think as one. Individual drones don't expect threats inside their vessel. The internal structure pulsed with bioluminescent pathways, carrying information rather than electrical signals. Cythera drones moved with eerie synchronization, barely registering the human intruders who'd masked their heat signatures and electrical outputs. Meanwhile, in the nebula's swirling gases, Captain Fabo Nkosi watched from the bridge of the Earth vessel Shaka as the main Cythera fleet approached the outpost. They've deployed in standard assault formation, his first officer reported. Exactly as predicted. Nkosi's expression remained calm. Signal the Lorani vessels. Execute pattern Sierra 9. Across the system, the seemingly underdefended Lorani ships began emergency retreat protocols, broadcasting distress calls, and venting non-essential systems to simulate critical damage. The Cythera fleet, sensing easy prey, accelerated in pursuit. Enemy vessels entering the nebula perimeter, announced the sensor officer. 94 ships total. Nkosi allowed himself a small smile. Activate the mines. Throughout the nebula, hundreds of electromagnetic pulse devices simultaneously activated, sending waves of disruption through the gas clouds. The specialized weapons, designed to target the specific frequencies used by Cythera neural networks, created temporary communication gaps between the pursuing ships and the main hive consciousness. At that precise moment, aboard the Cythera command vessel, Sophia's team reached the central node chamber. Charges placed, reported Specialist Kim, fingers dancing across the detonator controls. Ready on your mark. Sophia studied the pulsing organic mass before them. The ship's connection to the greater hive mind. Execute. The quantum charges detonated silently, their energy destroying neural pathways rather than physical structures. Throughout the vessel, drones froze in confusion as their connection fractured. In the nebula, the Cythera fleet's perfect formation dissolved into chaos. Ships veered randomly, some colliding as their coordinated movements failed. All vessels, weapons-free, ordered Nkosi as the human-Lorani combined fleet emerged from concealed positions. The battle that followed stunned even the most optimistic Lorani commanders. Without centralized coordination, the numerically superior Cythera could not adapt to the unpredictable attack patterns. Human vessels executed complex maneuvers while Lorani ships, newly emboldened, abandoned their traditional formations to follow the humans' lead. Sophia's team fought their way back to their extraction point, facing increasingly disorganized resistance. As the Shadow Talon detached from the now crippled command ship, she watched Cythera vessels attempting to retreat. "They're running," Lieutenant Chen remarked with surprise. "No," Sophia corrected, watching the tactical display. "They're regrouping. The hive is learning." Aboard the Lorani command carrier, Tactical Officer Mrelvin observed the human victory celebration with fascination. The strange rituals, the naming of the dead, the preservation of their final messages, seemed primitive yet oddly moving. They fight harder because of their losses, he noted to Admiral Tonval. Each death makes them more determined, not less. The Admiral's compound eyes shifted uneasily. I begin to understand why they were quarantined. Major Hiroshi Tanaka crouched motionless in the shadow of a massive processing node, his adaptive camouflage shifting to match the pulsating purple-black of Cythera architecture. Beside him, Lieutenant Amara Okafor monitored their surroundings through specialized sensors that detected the subtle neural emissions of approaching drones. 3 workers incoming, she whispered, her voice barely audible even through their direct comlink. Standard patrol pattern. Tanaka acknowledged with a slight hand gesture. His 6-person infiltration team had been on the Cythera-controlled world designated HC-329 for 72 hours, gathering intelligence and placing monitoring devices at key locations. The Lorani had insisted such a mission was impossible. The Cythera hive mind would detect any intruders immediately. The humans had proven them wrong. Central Processing Hub secure, came the voice of Sergeant Queasy over the comm. Data extraction at 80%. 3 worker drones passed within meters of Tanaka and Okafor, their eyeless sensor arrays sweeping methodically. The adaptive camouflage, combined with suppressors that masked human biological signatures, rendered the team effectively invisible. Once the drones passed, Tanaka led Okafor toward their primary objective, a massive structure the team had identified as a communications relay. Unlike traditional technology, Cythera systems were semi-organic, pulsing with fluids that carried information between worlds. Dr. Kuznetsova needs to see this, Okafor murmured as they approached the towering structure. Back on the Lorani command station, Dr. Elena Kuznetsova analyzed the incoming data streams from Tanaka's team alongside several other infiltration squads deployed across Cythera territory. Her makeshift laboratory had become a chaotic assembly of human equipment interfaced with Lorani technology. The neural patterns are remarkably consistent, she explained to the gathered Lorani scientists. Their communication system uses specific radiation frequencies to maintain cohesion across vast distances. Zivpol, the chief Lorani engineer, studied the data with growing excitement. These frequencies, they're unusually narrowband, almost vulnerable. Exactly, Alina confirmed. The Cythera evolved on a world with minimal background radiation. Their neural networks never needed to filter out competing signals. She brought up a simulation showing the Cythera communication network spanning their conquered territory. We've been fighting the drones, but what if we target the network itself? For 3 days, Alina worked relentlessly, developing a device that could generate precisely tuned interference across the identified frequencies. The prototype disruptor, when tested on captured Cythera tissue samples, showed promising results: complete neural pathway disruption. This could sever their connection permanently, she announced to the assembled human Lorani command staff. Not just local disruption like our previous tactics, complete systemic failure. Admiral Jackson studied the schematics with a frown. Delivery is the problem. This needs to be deployed at their central hub, the source of their coordination. Tactical displays showed the location, a heavily fortified world deep within Cythera territory. Designated as the Nexus by intelligence assets, it was surrounded by thousands of warships and defensive platforms. A direct assault would be suicide. Admiral Tonval stated flatly. Even with our combined fleets. Not an assault, corrected Jackson. An insertion. The mission parameters took shape. A small team would need to penetrate Cythera defenses, reach the planetary surface, and deploy the disruptor at the central node. The projected survival rate was less than 20%. When Alina presented the plan to Earth's leadership, 17 Special Forces teams volunteered immediately. Among them was the legendary Ghost Wolves, led by Colonel Marcus Martinez. Your team already completed 3 high-risk missions. Alina protested when Martinez approached her. You've earned a rotation home. Martinez's weathered face betrayed no emotion. This is what we've trained for our entire lives, Doctor. The chance to save not just humanity, but an entire galactic civilization. As the Ghost Wolves began preparation, Lorani observers watched with a mixture of awe and unease. The humans showed no fear, only focused determination. They embraced death as a possibility. Vitel Tanis remarked to Zivpol, "How can any species evolve such a mindset?" The engineer considered this. Perhaps on a world where death always walked beside them. Accepting its presence became strength. The early warning system triggered at 3:47 hours Universal Time. General Zhang was awakened instantly, his neural implant flooding his consciousness with tactical data before his eyes fully opened. "Status report," he demanded as he entered Earth Defense Command 6 minutes later. "Massive Cythera fleet movement detected at the edge of our solar system," Lieutenant Park announced, her fingers manipulating the holographic display. 60% of their known armée. They've identified us as the primary threat. Zhang studied the approaching formation. Thousands of vessels moving with perfect synchronization toward Earth. Intelligence had predicted this response, but not so quickly. The Cythera were adapting. "Alert status Omega," he ordered calmly. "Activate the orbital defense grid. Begin civilian evacuation protocols." Across the planet, emergency systems activated with practiced precision. In cities worldwide, civilians moved methodically toward underground shelters. From Mongolia to Manhattan, drills practiced for generations became reality with remarkably little panic. The Lorani diplomatic vessel arrived 2 hours later, their fastest ship carrying Ambassador Vitel Tanis himself. The alien dignitary rushed into Earth's command center, his translator struggling to keep pace with his agitated clicks and whistles. "We've come to warn you," he began, before stopping abruptly at the sight before him. Earth had transformed. Massive defense platforms, previously hidden beneath stealth fields, now orbited the planet in complex patterns. Launch bays on the moon disgorged swarms of automated interceptors. Beneath the surface, enormous shield generators hummed to life, creating overlapping defensive barriers against orbital bombardment. "You were prepared for this," Vitel Tanis observed unnecessarily. President Sofia Okafor, who had arrived moments before, nodded. "We've been expecting visitors." She gestured toward ancient science fiction posters decorating one wall of the command center. "Every human generation prepares for this day." In orbit, Admiral Nkosi commanded the home fleet from the flagship Mandela. His forces were outnumbered 10-1, but position and preparation would count for more than numbers. "All vessels, assume formation Delta," he ordered as the Cythera fleet approached Mars orbit. "Activate Charon Protocol." On Pluto's moon, massive electromagnetic cannons that had been disguised as research stations for decades powered up, launching specialized EMP warheads toward designated coordinates. The weapons detonated precisely as the vanguard of the Cythera fleet passed through, temporarily disrupting their formation. The battle for Earth began in earnest as the Cythera recovered, accelerating toward the blue planet. Human ships engaged with disciplined precision, focusing on disrupting communication nodes rather than attempting to match the aliens' overwhelming firepower. On the Cythera command vessel, the Hive consciousness processed this new threat. These humans fought differently from the Lorani. Unpredictably, savagely, without apparent concern for losses. Analysis subroutines calculated multiple potential adaptations before selecting a strategy that had overwhelmed 17 previous species: biological warfare. Specialized ships broke formation, deploying canisters that entered Earth's atmosphere, engineered pathogens designed to target human DNA, extracted from samples collected during previous engagements. In Defense Command, alarm signals flashed as biological sensors detected the attack. "Bioweapon deployment confirmed," announced Lieutenant Park. "Cythera pattern matches intelligence predictions." Instead of panic, Zhang smiled thinly. Activate Countermeasure Protocol Sierra 5. Across the planet, specialized atmospheric processors activated. Technology developed decades earlier after humanity discovered they weren't alone in the universe. The processors neutralized the pathogens while orbital defense platforms targeted the bioweapon carriers with pinpoint accuracy. On the flagship Mandela, Admiral Nkosi received the update and opened a secure channel to General Zhang. Bioweapon neutralized. Permission to execute Thunderbolt. Zhang's response was immediate. Authorized. Throughout the solar system, concealed weapons platforms, hidden in asteroids, embedded in planetary rings, disguised as communication satellites, simultaneously activated. The coordinated barrage caught the Cythera fleet in a devastating crossfire. Ambassador Exel Tanis watched in stunned silence as the mighty Cythera armada began to fracture under the human counterattack. "How long have you been preparing these defenses?" he asked President Okafor. "Since we first looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone," she replied quietly, and feared the answer might be no. The stealth insertion vessel Ghost made no sound as it slipped through the debris field surrounding the Cythera homeworld. Inside, Colonel Marcus Martinez and his team performed final equipment checks in silence. Each member of the Ghost Wolves carried multiple redundancies: backup weapons, spare disruptors, emergency extraction beacons, knowing full well most would never be used. 10 minutes to insertion point, announced the pilot, her voice steady despite the gravity of their mission. Martinez studied his team's faces. Sergeant Rivera, demolitions expert; Lieutenant Choi, infiltration specialist; Captain Almaty, tactical systems. They had trained together for years, survived impossible odds across 3 galaxies. None expected to return from this mission. "The disruptor core is stable," Captain Almaty reported, monitoring the device developed by Dr. Kuznetsova. "Signal profile is minimal. The hive shouldn't detect it until activation." The Ghost slipped through a gap in the Cythera orbital defense grid, exploiting a blind spot identified by analysis of data from previous infiltration missions. The planet below pulsed with sickly green light, its surface covered with massive organic structures rather than conventional cities. "Remember," Martinez told his team as they prepared for atmospheric entry, "our primary objective is deploying the disruptor at the central node. Everything else is secondary." The insertion went smoothly, too smoothly. As the team made their way through twisting organic corridors toward the planet's core, they encountered minimal resistance. "Something's wrong," whispered Lieutenant Choi, scanning ahead with specialized sensors. "Drone activity is far below projected levels. They're concentrating forces elsewhere," Martinez realized. The Earth attack is drawing their attention. The team progressed deeper, using adaptive camouflage to avoid the drones they did encounter. Massive chambers opened before them, revealing disturbing scenes: birthing pools where genetically identical drones emerged by the thousands, neural conditioning centers where freshly formed drones were integrated into the hive mind. "This isn't natural evolution," Captain Almaty said quietly, collecting tissue samples. "These are engineered organisms." Martinez nodded grimly. "They're weapons. Someone made them as weapons." As they approached the central chamber, Rivera's scanner began emitting a soft warning tone. Energy readings spiking ahead. "The node is active." The central chamber dwarfed anything they had encountered. A massive, pulsating brain-like structure filled the cavernous space, glowing tendrils extending throughout the complex. Around it, specialized drones tended to its needs with religious-like devotion. "The disruptor needs to be placed at the primary ganglia." Almaty indicated a pulsing nexus of mural tissue near the chamber center. Direct contact required. As they prepared to move, a sudden shift in drone activity froze them in place. Throughout the chamber, every Cythera simultaneously turned toward their position. Their camouflage had failed. "They've adapted to our technology," Martinez realized as swarms of drones rushed toward them. Plan B: defensive positions. The Ghost Wolves fought with brutal efficiency, their specialized weapons cutting down waves of attacking drones. But for each one they dropped, 10 more emerged from adjoining chambers. The disruptor, clutched in Amati's hands, took a glancing hit from enemy fire, its status light flickering from green to amber. "Damage to the primary circuit," she reported. "The remote detonator is offline." Martinez assessed their deteriorating situation instantly. The plan had required them to plant the device and escape before activation. Now someone would need to trigger it manually, a suicide mission. "Get everyone out," he ordered his second in command. "I'll deliver the package." Their protests were immediate but short-lived. All recognized the mathematical certainty of their situation. One death or all of theirs, with the mission failing either way. "It's been an honor," Lieutenant Choi said simply, as his team fought their way back toward their extraction point, creating a diversion. Martinez took the damaged disruptor and sprinted toward the central node. Drones swarmed him from all sides, their claws tearing at his armor. Blood streamed from multiple wounds as he pushed forward, meter by agonizing meter. "For Earth," he whispered, reaching the pulsing central ganglia. "For everyone." The explosion that followed was not physical but neural, a cascading disruption that spread through the vast network of the Cythera collective consciousness. Across the galaxy, millions of drones suddenly found themselves alone in their own minds for the first time in their existence. The Great Swarm, the terror of a dozen civilizations, collapsed into confused, disconnected fragments in an instant. Colonel Marcus Martinez never felt it happen. His consciousness had already faded to darkness, his final mission complete. The Grand Assembly Hall of Lorania Prime glittered with ceremonial lights, its architecture enhanced by traditional luminescence displays that pulsed in rhythmic patterns. Representatives from 12 formerly threatened civilizations gathered to commemorate what historians were already calling the Liberation War. Dr. Elena Kuznetsova stood before the assembled dignitaries, her formal Earth uniform a stark contrast to the flowing garments of the Lorani. Behind her, a holographic display showed Colonel Martinez's official portrait, his stern features now known across the galaxy as the face of humanity's sacrifice. "You called us dangerous," she began, her words translated across 1,000 worlds. "And you were right. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day, where predators lurked in every shadow, where survival meant constant vigilance. Our history is written in blood and fire." The Lorani dignitaries shifted uncomfortably, but Elena continued with unwavering conviction. "But danger is not evil, it's power, and power can protect as well as destroy. You quarantined Earth because you feared what we might become. Today you know those fears were justified, but not in the way you imagined." In the 3 weeks since the Cythera collapse, the Confederation Council had debated humanity's new role in galactic affairs. Many feared that humans, having saved the galaxy, might now seek to conquer it. Earth's demonstrated military capabilities far exceeded anything in Confederation records. Admiral Jackson, standing at military attention beside the Lorani High Counselor, had provided full transparency about Earth's defensive systems, a gesture of trust that surprised the Confederation diplomats. "We didn't develop these technologies to conquer," he had explained during the security briefings. "We developed them because we've spent our entire existence expecting threats. The universe validated our paranoia." As the ceremony continued, emergency signals suddenly flashed across the communication grid. Ambassador Excel Tanis rushed to the podium, interrupting the proceedings. "We're receiving distress calls from former Cythera-controlled worlds," he announced. "Billions of drones, suddenly disconnected from the hive mind, are struggling to develop individual consciousness. Many are dying, unable to function independently." The assembly erupted in overlapping discussions. The Lorani, still recovering from their own trauma, hesitated to render aid to those who had so recently been their enemies. Other species expressed similar reluctance. President Okafor stepped forward without hesitation. "Earth will respond. We have medical ships prepared. They were your enemies, protested one Centauri representative. "Why would you help them?" Admiral Jackson, who had lost his own brother in the fighting, answered simply, "Because they aren't enemies anymore. They're victims." Within hours, the first relief vessels launched from Earth, carrying medical supplies, neural stabilization technology, and teachers rather than weapons. The humanitarian fleet, dubbed Operation New Dawn, represented the largest peaceful deployment in human history. Dr. Kuznetsova watched the fleet depart from the observation deck of the Lorani station. Ambassador Axel Tanis joined her, his compound eyes reflecting the departing ships. "I don't understand," he admitted. "After everything the Cythera did. We know what it's like to be afraid." Elena explained. "We know what it's like to fight. But we also know what comes after, the rebuilding, the healing. That's just as important as the victory." The Cythera crisis had revealed humanity as the most formidable military force in known space, a revelation that still caused unease among some Confederation members. But as Earth's humanitarian efforts unfolded, the galaxy began to understand what made humans truly unique, not their capacity for violence, but their ability to balance that capacity with compassion. 1 month after the victory celebration, a permanent human embassy opened on Lorania Prime. Above its entrance, inscribed in 12 languages, were the words that had first announced humanity's arrival on the galactic stage. "We're coming. Hold the line." But now those words carried a different meaning, a promise of protection rather than a prelude to war. As ancient quarantine beacons were dismantled and trade routes opened to Earth, the galaxy's most dangerous beings assumed their new role as its most dedicated guardians.